Dado, are you recording?
Yes, miss.
All right. Additional security of data 8.4. We're gonna cover firewalls, security protocols, encryption, and one method of authentication as well. Then we're gonna leave the rest of it for next week. Now, firewalls. Firewalls can be software or hardware. Sits between the user's computer and the external network. Inbound and outbound. I'll show you actually how you can turn on off firewall rules. Incoming and outgoing traffic, and what they cannot prevent is okay. Now, firewalls. When you put firewall in your network, that means you're monitoring and restricting data coming into your network from an external network, coming into your network, and from your network going into an external network. That's what we call incoming and outgoing traffic or data. Okay, this is what firewalls consider. This is what they're trying to control. Okay, however, firewalls cannot work on users in the local network. If you're, let's say, for example, you and your brother are connected to IQ Online, okay, from the same access point. Okay, if your brother tries to send you an attack or attack your device, he can do that. The firewall cannot does not have control over the local network traffic. Secondly, users carelessness. For example, something your firewall blocks, you go ahead and enable, or you go ahead and open links that are not secure. This is your fault. Thirdly, if you go ahead and disable your own firewall, what can the firewall do? Can't do anything. Now, this is a graphical representation of firewall on a network. And yeah, this uses packet tracer. I think I showed you how to create a local network. Now, this part is your local network. Okay? This is your local network. So PC0 and then PC1 are from the same network. They're connected to the switch, okay? And then the switch, before it is connected to the router, okay? Because once you connect to the router, that means you have a WAN, right? Between the switch and the router sits the firewall. Here's your firewall, okay? Here's where you can actually set the rules. This is a physical firewall, by the way. That means it's hardware. Could be software as well, like the one on our computers. So whenever this computer tries to connect to, for example, google.com, the request or the data goes through the firewall. If it allows, then it will reach the router and then to Google server. And then if Google server responds 8.8.8.8 and 8 for 8. If it responds, then it will come through again the firewall. If the firewall allows it, then it will allow inbound or incoming data to your PC. Okay. How does it work? This is actually important. You should be able to answer this question. How do firewalls work? So, whenever you access the internet, for example, HTTP, okay, you connect to a port, okay, a port, so you can say, for example, HTTP uses port number 80, okay, so different ports are identified with different numbers.
Yes.
Okay. So another example, for example, incoming mail or email, okay, uses port.
Hey, miss.
Hello.
Sorry for being late. I forgot that we had class.
Okay, yeah. Who are you? So incoming mail uses port number 110. Outgoing mail uses port number 25. Okay. What does the firewall do? So the firewall opens, okay, or closes these ports, or unused ports. If you do not use a port number, why do you leave it open? Okay, you can choose to deliberately close certain ports, okay, if you don't want your employees or the people on the network to use this specific service that uses this port number. However, in most of the times there are port numbers that you don't use at all. So why do you keep it open? You should close it, because if it's open, it allows for attackers to to attack your network. So in this case, can you please mute your mic? Okay. Now, where was I? So if you leave a port number open, something that you don't use, it will allow people to actually get into your network because the port is open, so they can bypass your firewall. So what firewall does is closing or opening these ports. All right, good. Let me actually show you advanced settings. You can actually see, so you can actually see inbound rules. Okay, Apache HTTP server, it is enabled. That means you can the firewall allows it. Let's see what doesn't allow. Media center extenders, Q-Wave, whatever this is, doesn't look very nice. It looks very suspicious. So the firewall doesn't allow it to this server to send any data to you or to your network. It's inbound rules. Outbound from your computer to others. Let's see. What is this one? Routing and remote access, L2CP out. Layer 2, layer 2. Routing and remote access. PPTP. Oh gosh, all of these are disabled. Point-to-point transport protocol. Layer 2 transport protocol. GRE out. Whatever this is, I don't know what this one is. So if you wanna create a new rule, you do it with a port, okay? And then what is the port number? For example, 80, 443, 5000, whatever. And is it TCP or UDP? So firewall works on the port numbers, okay? So that's that. And it's important for you to know this. Any questions regarding firewalls? All right, security protocols. So like I said, we have different kinds of protocols, lots of protocols. We're going to talk about security protocols. And of all of the security protocols, we're going to talk about SSL and TLS. So protocols, what are they? Set of rules used by computers to communicate with each other over the network. So they're used for communication over a network. If you're not using any sorts of network whatsoever, you don't need it. You don't need any protocols. You don't need to follow any protocols. Okay. So SSL and TLS are two different kinds of security protocols. These are used by HTTPS. Used by HTTPS. SSL, that's why we're saying HTTPS is secure. Hypertext Transfer Protocol, secure. The reason, what makes it secure? First of all, it encrypts the data. So SSL, both SSL and TLS, they encrypt the data. So SSL is used to encrypt the data and manage the security of the message transmission over the internet. TLS is just a newer version of SSL. Works more efficiently than SSL. Sorry.
Miss, can you go back 1 second? I want to check the meaning of TLS. I want to write it down quickly.
Transport layer security. Okay.
Miss, which one's used by HTTPS?
Both.
Okay, thank you.
Like HTTPS doesn't use both of them at the same time. Some websites, they use SSL with their HTTPS.
Thank you, Miss.
You're welcome. Other websites prefer using TLS for their security. Okay? But HTTPS supports both. One of them has to be used. It's totally up to you whether, if you're the website developer, it's up to you whether you want to use SSL or TLS. And we're going to discuss the differences between them, why we sometimes use SSL and why do we sometimes use TLS. Okay, but you have to use at least one of them if you're using HTTPS. Otherwise, you can use HTTP, which uses a set of other protocols, and your website will not be secure. And the first thing that these two different kinds of protocols do is that they encrypt your data. Okay. And TLS is a newer version of SSL. And we're going to see why do certain websites still use SSL even though TLS is out there and it's more efficient than SSL. Okay. So this is just an image. I got it from the book. How does this thing work? Before I talk about this, let me go to this slide. This is the SSL process. Okay, what does the SSL do? There's something called the handshake process. Literally, the handshake process. What does the handshake process do? The handshake process happens before you actually send data, the actual data. Okay. So let's see. Client with a web browser, client using Google Chrome. Oops. And then here's the web server of bank.example.com. Okay. So if I enter HTTPS www.bank.example.com, then the browser connects the server. So the server knows that this client is asking for the homepage of this website. Before it can actually send the homepage for you to display, to see the homepage of this website, this is what happens behind the scenes. This website or web server sends its own certificate, okay, in order to use SSL or TLS, or in general HTTPS, you have to obtain a certificate. So they send the certificate to my web browser, to my Google Chrome. Google Chrome checks the certificate, breaks the connection if necessary. If the certificate is not legitimate, it will break the connection. Okay. Otherwise, it generates a symmetric key for session, encrypts session key with server's public key, and then sends it to the server. We're going to talk about public key and private key and symmetric and asymmetric later on. Okay. But it generates a way, I think I should write that down. Okay. Generates a way to encrypt the data. There has to be some sort of algorithm to encrypt the data. Otherwise, neither you nor the web server will understand what's going on. Okay. So then the web server decrypts the session key. Browser and the web server only, and the web server know only the common session key, and then encrypts the session, and then decrypts the web page. Once the handshake process is done, then this web server sends the data, and the web browser will be able to decrypt it. It sends the data, it sends the web page encrypted in an encrypted version, and then this will be able to decrypt it. So I'm just going to write that down. So once the handshake process is complete, the web server sends data, and the browser sends the encrypted data, and the browser will be able to decrypt it. Okay. That's when we say we don't have rules on the internet, but we have some certain protocols that follow some sort of process in order to make it secure, in order to govern the websites that are available out there. Okay. The handshake process. So, okay, so what was the handshake process? The handshake process is establishing a secure connection between the client and the server. And by secure connection, we mean encrypted. Okay, encrypted data with digital, with a verified certificate. Do you guys understand what's going on here? Or is everyone just lost? No. I'm very confused. All right.
Miss,
Yeah.
is this process for both SSL and TLS?
Yeah.
Okay,
Both SSL and TLS use the same thing, but TLS uses some other things we're going to talk about in the next slide.
okay, I understand.
Let's try and read this process. The user's web browser sends a message so that it can connect to the required website, which is secured by SSL or TLS. The web browser requests that web server and identifies itself. The web server responds by sending a copy of the SSL certificate to the user's web browser. And then if the web browser can authenticate this certificate, it sends the message back to the web server to allow the communication to begin. Once this message is received, the web server acknowledges the web browser and SSL encrypted two-way data transfer begins. So I am Google Chrome from your website, from your computer, okay? And I ask for www.google.com, okay? Which is secured by HTTPS by SSL, okay? So the web browser, I am Google Chrome. I send a request to Google server. And of course, I have to identify myself as well. So I'm a legitimate sender, or there's a legitimate request. It's not like something like an attack or anything. I'm just a normal user. And I ask for Google. And what Google does, since it uses SSL, Google responds to me, okay, google.com responds to me by sending its digital certificate or SSL certificate. Once I receive the SSL certificate, I look at it, see if it's actually legitimate. If it's legitimate, then I send a response back to the web server, to Google server, and I say, okay, I recognize that you're a legitimate web server and your SSL certificate is legitimate, so you can send me data. Once I say that, Google's server will send encrypted data in a way that I will be able to decrypt it to understand the encrypted data. Okay? So there is a little bit of like introduction, like them introducing themselves to each other before you can actually see the web page. There are websites and servers that issue SSL certificates, but you have to verify your name, your email addresses, your purpose. I don't know. You have digital signature and stuff like that in order to get the SSL. So obtaining an SSL certificate is not easy. All right. So if the website has an SSL certificate, that means that website is secure. Because first of all, it's not easy to obtain an SSL certificate. Secondly, the web browser thinks that, acknowledges that this SSL certificate is legitimate. Thirdly, all data communication between you and the server is encrypted. That's why they say that make sure you don't enter passwords into insecure websites. Only enter passwords or personal data or any other sensitive data into HTTPS, because it's not an easy process. Okay? Do you guys understand? Is it any better now?
Not really.
No?
Miss,
Miss,
could you repeat it
actually,
again?
Huh?
the previous slide was much more easier than this one, like
This
the
one?
handshake process. Yeah, that one.
Okay. Let's leave this for now because you wouldn't understand how public key and private key works. Okay? Let's come to encryption. Okay? Let's come to encryption. Since SSL and TLS both use encryption, let's see what encryption is and how it works. Okay? Encryption is scrambling data so that it can not be read by unintended recipients. That means if along the way, let me just get to this little diagram. If I send data along the way to this server, if in the middle somebody just comes here and gets my data, all of the data that I get, that I have sent, they wouldn't be able to understand it. Even if the data is hacked, they wouldn't be able to understand. Okay, that's what we call encryption or encrypted data. All right, encryption cannot prevent data from hacking. It can only make it unreadable by unintended users. If you want to prevent your data from hacking, you use other security methods like firewalls and anti-malware software and stuff like that. But encryption cannot prevent data from hacking. It can only make the data unreadable by unless you are actually the intended recipient. Now, we have different kinds of encryption. Encryption algorithms can be very, very sophisticated. Okay, can be very hard. So it's very hard to guess. Even if a hacker gets your data, it will be very hard for them to actually guess what the data is. Now, how do we encrypt data? We encrypt data using what we call encryption key. Using encryption key. Okay. What is encryption key in the first place? It's your algorithm. So how have I encrypted my data? For example, if I say hello, hello becomes DHYY A. How did I make this hello DHYYA? Using an algorithm. Okay. So Chira says, so this becomes Chira says DHYYA. You as the recipient, so I'm sending this to Adan, let's say. Adan receives Adam receives the data. How does Adam know that this DHYYA is actually hello? How can Adam make this DHYYA back to hello? How can he do that? For Adam to be able, by running an algorithm, exactly. For Adam to be able to understand this DHYYA, he has to know what is called encryption key. Okay? He has to have the encryption key. How did I encrypt this data? Okay? How did I encrypt this data? He has to have the key using an encryption key. I encrypted my data using an encryption key. Adam has to know the encryption key that I used for encrypting the data in order to be able to decrypt the data. So this process is called encryption. Changing DHYYI back to hello is called decryption. I mean, these are just processes. I mean, there's not much going on here. And you encrypt using an encryption key, you decrypt again using an encryption key, using the same encryption key. Do you guys understand so far? So the DHYYA is called an encrypted text. Encrypted text. Okay. Hello is called decrypted text. By the way, you should know these terms. Not decrypted text, sorry. A plain text. Okay. Any questions so far? So I have a certain text. I encrypt it using an encryption key, and I send it to the recipient. The recipient has to have the encryption key. Using the encryption key, the recipient will be able to decrypt the text. All right? And there are different methods of sending your encryption key. How do you send your encryption key? How does Adam know my encryption key? That's a different topic, okay? But Adam has to have some sort of key in order to be able to decrypt this text. Otherwise, even Adam wouldn't be able. Any question? No. Depends on your encryption key. Okay? Depends on your algorithm. So the simplest form of encryption is called Caesar cipher. Basha. The simplest form of encryption is called Caesar cipher. This is also called shift encryption by shift or shift encryption, something like that. Okay. For example, you're gonna say, this is for your information, by the way, Caesar cipher put in the book. For example, you're gonna say shift by 2 or shift by 3. Okay. So this is your encryption key. Encryption and decryption key. It's called shift by 2 and shift by 3. And what does this mean? If you have shift by 3, this is an example. If you have, if you have shift by 3, A becomes D, B becomes E, C becomes F. All right? Cool? Cool. Now, this is a key. This is an encryption key. This is my lovely encryption key. And I have this encrypted text. Okay? Now I want all of you to decrypt this text. Yalla. Here's your encrypted text. Here's your key. And I want you to decrypt it. All of you. So Q becomes T. E becomes H. B becomes...
Miss, is it the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog?
Shut up. Yes, that's what we're gonna get. So yeah, this becomes this, the quick, yeah,
Quick brown lazy fox. Good job, Dustin. Good job.
the quick brown jumps over over the lazy dog. So this is called encrypted text. What's this? So this one is the encrypted text or ciphertext. Encrypted text or ciphertext. This one is called plain text. So do you guys understand the concept of an encrypted text and a plain text and an encryption key? Do you guys understand this? Now this could be very, very sophisticated, very, very complicated. We don't usually use complicated encryption keys because it will slow down the process. Imagine you typing in Google and Google use a very sophisticated algorithm with their SSL or TLS to actually let you decrypt the text, and you have to wait for your browser to run the algorithm, which is very complicated, just to show you the Google's web page, which is not good. Okay, but sometimes we need it, so it depends on the scenario. Now back to the handshake process. Okay, the browser, let's say, actually let me go ahead and open Google. Here's my browser, which is Google Chrome. See, I changed the theme. It's so nice. All right, I go to Google Chrome. Oh my god, okay, so I go on Google Chrome and I like to go to, I don't know which website. I don't want to go to Google because when I explain it, Google Chrome and Google is just, this one is insecure. Let's say YouTube. Okay, now this YouTube, oh my god, I like this. What's this? All right,
Oh
Now.
my god, you listen to Dua Lipa?
No, I don't know why these things are there. I don't watch these things, but anyways, doesn't matter. So this is definitely HTTPS www.youtube.com. The moment I type in this and press enter, okay, I type in the URL and press enter, what does it do? What does this thing do? Google Chrome sends a request to YouTube's server. YouTube server identifies that this Google Chrome is legitimate, first of all. Secondly, once it identifies that this is legitimate, YouTube server sends its SSL certificate to my web browser. And my web browser looks at the SSL certificate, okay? See? Here's the certification. Certificate is valid. You can actually see the certificate. Here's the certificate. Okay? If the certification is valid, if the SSL certificate is valid, then it sends a reply to YouTube server saying that, okay, I believe that your certificate is valid and everything is valid. Now you can send me your data. Okay? But before it sends the data, actually, it sends the key. Which one sends the key? I just need to check. Web browser, my Google Chrome sends an encryption key. And it says, okay, you are legitimate. And then encrypt your data using this key that I give you. So YouTube uses the key that I sent to YouTube to encrypt its messages or its data or whatever website that you want to see, using the encryption key that you just provided. And the encrypted data, once it encrypts the data, it sends you the encrypted data. Like this one is actual data, which is the actual website. And your website will be able to decrypt it because it knows the encryption key. And it decrypts it, and you can see the website. And this happens in a matter of milliseconds. Do you understand? Kinda. It's everything here is new, so I recommend you to read it carefully and hopefully memorize it, because everything here is new, and once you get to read it, you'll be able to understand it. But for now, I want you to understand the general picture, how this thing works. And you can go ahead and read it on your own, and you'll be able to remember the information. But is there anyone who's so confused that doesn't know what's going on? No? Okay. Okay. SSL and TLS is formed of two layers. Handshake protocol, that's what we called, and then record protocol. The handshake protocol allows the user and the website server to authenticate themselves and use encryption, right? The record protocol allows the actual data to be transmitted over the network or the internet. The handshake protocol is just an introduction. Hello, my name is Google Chrome from this user. And the server says I'm YouTube, and here's my certificate, stuff like that. And what is the difference between SSL and this? Up to here, they both perform the same actions. But we said that TLS is a newer version of SSL. So what's the difference?
Miss, I have a question.
Yeah.
What is the handshake protocol? Like, can you not use encryption without getting access first?
You can use like, what do you mean? Can you not use encryption without using it?
I'm reading the definition for it. It says it allows the user and the website to server to authenticate themselves and use encryption. What does use encryption mean? Like, do you encrypt the file or decrypt it?
The data that you send over the network.
Okay.
The YouTube's, for example, web page, or that's the YouTube. You get it from the YouTube server. If you search for anything over YouTube, it is encrypted. Or if you type in username and password in a website that uses HTTPS, it is encrypted. Okay.
Okay, so
So
you
the
need
handshake
access
protocol-
first before you can encrypt it, right?
Yes, both need to verify and authenticate them. Both sides, your side and the server side, must have a legitimate SSL certificate or TLS certificate. Then your browser will be able to show the actual website. Otherwise, it will break the connection and say website error 404 or something like that.
Mm.
Okay?
Yeah. Thank
So
you, miss.
first they authenticate themselves, they validate themselves. After that, they send the encryption key to use encryption, to encrypt the data. Once they
Yeah.
send the encryption key, then the record protocol comes after the handshake. They send the actual data using the encryption key that they just shared with each other.
Mm. All right.
Good?
Yeah.
So what is the difference between SSL and TLS? TLS separates the handshake protocol from the record protocol. With SSL, it's just one whole process. Okay? With TLS, it's different. It treats it differently. It treats each protocol differently. TLS has a more improved performance than SSL. Sorry. Than SSL. Through the use of session caching. Okay, so when you connect to an HTTPS, you establish a session. And this session usually expires. Okay? With TLS, it can cache this session. What does it mean? That means TLS can choose to resume an existing session to avoid process. And of course, this boosts the performance. And that's the major difference between them. Good. Now you can see that this is pretty advanced. It's pretty new, not advanced. It's pretty new, and it's good to know these things. Session caching, and how can you resume an existing session? What is the handshake process? What is the record process? What is encryption? But since it happens very fast, when you think about all of these things happening behind the scenes, it's just hard to grasp. But trust me, all of these things happen behind the scene. Good? Yes, no.
Miss, are you gonna post these on the Google Classroom?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
So that was encryption. And we're not going to talk about auth pretty late. Let me just Control X this. And then put this thank you over here. Let me get the registration. 19 April.
Miss, are we done?
Yes, we are done. Akar.